Anyhow, let's start now. And I'm a professor at the university. I'm doing this kind of stuff for a long time in the usual way, meaning written exams, oral exams, and looking forward that we do it electronically one day. And with an eminent group of experts doing text analysis for a long time. Matthias Grabmair, Waltl, doctors of informatics, based on research in video informatics, also text analysis, now working at SINC or PMW research, and Florina, Piroi, she's working at the University of Technology in Vienna, and she's doing their information retrieval and linguistic analysis. So I will hand over to them saying what kind of research they have done, worked, and then we have some kind of question around saying what we can do in this regard concerning legal education, concerning grading, what's the expectations, what's the results. Okay, so please, I will start with the most experienced one, Matthias Grabmair. He was in international law for a long time ago in Augsburg, as far as I know. Then he was 10 years or more in Pittsburgh, Kevin Ashley, and now he's back in Germany and working for a well-known company, SINC. Going to know what the industry is doing, and maybe one day we'll be back at law faculty telling us how we do exams in the usual way in the 21st century, and how we teach lawyers to be good technology lawyers, to use the technologies to make law a bit easier. Okay, Matthias, floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. For those of you whom I've not met yet, as introduced, my name is Matthias Grabmair. I work at SINC in Wiesbaden, Germany, on natural language processing on legal text in various ways. My background is that I did my PhD with Kevin Ashley at the University of Pittsburgh, specializing in computational models of argument. And I've been switching to natural language processing on legal text a couple of years ago, more or less. Just to provide a bit of context for this project, and I would ask my co-panelists to interrupt me if I'm missing anything or misstating anything. The group that you have in front of you today gathered on the occasion of a perspective of producing an experimental system with which grading of public international law examinations could be facilitated using technology. The idea would be that instead of the exam being produced by a student and then handed on paper to a correcting assistant, works on the paper in the process. This would be either produced digitally to begin with or digitized, so to say, and grading would happen in a specialized computer program that would ideally leverage some kind of natural language processing technology in the process. There's a number of potentials and challenges, and I think especially opportunities for interdisciplinary value added here that I would like to point out briefly before handing over to my co-panelists. The first one is just as a general notion for those of you who may be new to the topic of applying natural language processing to legal text. Legal text is different from text that is commonly worked on in natural language processing because it's typically multi-opinion, and it follows a certain grammatical structure and often has different surface forms than other texts. There's many citations. Text is often broken into subsections that may be indented on the page. There's a fair amount of enumerations, half sentences with hyphenation and so on, but also a lot of untypically used punctuation with regard to citations to statutes and cases, particularly in the Anglo-American legal tradition. And this poses challenges to many steps in the standard NLP pipeline as we see it in the sort of general popular science explanations of natural language processing and sentiment analysis and movie review analysis and other kinds of automatic translation and other kinds of applications that you may be familiar with. The other big assumption that NLP in legal text breaks with is the fact that in legal text, I cannot trust an individual sentence. So natural language processing on, say, Wikipedia text can more or less make the assumption that any individual sentence in the text contains a true fact of some kind, and exists with a fair amount of autonomy from its adjacent and surrounding contextual sentences. Whereas in legal text, if I take a legal opinion and I extract a sentence from it, I'm not sure, I can't tell what that sentence states. It may be the judge saying something, it may also be an expert witness saying something that the judge later disagrees with, it may also be a quote from a file or something. So the semantic complexity is greatly enhanced by virtue of the fact that one needs to attribute these statements as they exist in subparts of the text to the actors that contribute to the production of the document in the first place, so to say. The reason this group is excited about this project is because by working with exam texts from law school, one gets the opportunity to essentially work with texts as they're produced from ideally knowledgeable people in the law, which is not easily the case. There is a chance that these texts are always very well framed, because if we have 10 exams that all answer the same questions, you get 10 answers that each is sort of written conditioned on the question being posed, which is an interesting data constellation to be in as a natural language researcher. In particular, what I find interesting is that there are in law school typical kinds of questions and exam tasks to be fulfilled. So first of all, there's the classic explain such and so concept text, in which case grading is more or less a checking whether the student in writing the answer traverses all the correct concepts. The second part is essentially what could be a hypothetical case. And this is fairly common in German legal education, for example, where a hypothetical case is given to the student and the student has to give an analysis of the case in light of applicable statutes and cases. This is particularly interesting because there may be in an exam multiple ways to resolve the case, and there may be multiple feasible arguments, whereas the correct answer as it's being provided as sort of the gold standard to the correcting assistant may look very different from the student answers, but they may still be of good quality, but they may be using other words, they may be structuring it differently, and so on and so forth. So the task of taking the correct answer, so to say, and matching it with what the student produced is semantically very rich, and hence makes for a very nice research setup for us. Finally, what's very interesting in that regard is that we, of course, when deployed in a law school context, we have a very high chance of doing an actual empirical evaluation of the system in actual courses that are being taught. And that brings me to the second of the 3 points I want to make, which is that automatic grading or assisted grading or supported grading, as I would personally prefer to call it, provides a very nice link to the AI and education community that has engaged for a long time in research around the automatic grading of essays or tutoring systems, where even in law school, in law school settings, there has been work about teaching students argumentation by having them engage with different kinds of argument diagramming software, for example. So there's a number of different possibilities where one can build a small bridge to other disciplines at the intersection of AI and education that I think are very promising to explore, and I'd love to hear more thoughts about this. Let me just check this in a little bit. Yes, the ultimate utility here, I think, should be, having gone through legal education myself, I have to say my personal stake in this is that I think the endeavor should ultimately lead to more efficient, but also qualitatively better grading of exams, and ideally better feedback as it is provided to students. So when we look at the way automated MOOCs teach technical concepts, for example, where computer science students will produce code, and the code will be sent to a server, and the server runs it through a bunch of tests, and each test checks for a particular error condition and gives feedback back to the student saying, hey, there may be a division by 0 in here. Do you think have you accounted for that, and so on? And then the student has a chance to fix that. So maybe in the far future, a system like this could be a writing assistant or a teaching assistant for a law student in learning how to properly articulate ideas and concepts as they're answering things. Finally, I'd like to speak about the challenges that we face here, and this sort of leads into the discussion, so I don't want to make this too broad. First is that, yes, exams are produced in raw and very large numbers at law schools, but they still need to be digitized. They may be in poor quality depending on the kind of digitalization that's happening. So we are potentially dealing with a knowledge acquisition bottleneck of a quality, in the quality dimension, so to say. And they may be in need of a large amount of curation beforehand in order to achieve a balanced data set that one can actually train on. Finally, we're having a lot of divergence with regard to writing styles in these exams, which may lead to spurious correlations where things correlate with grades in ways that we don't really want them to correlate, which sort of goes in line with the transparent machine learning imperative that's been recently emerging from the community. And finally, after all, it's quite likely from our current vantage point that developing such systems for domain-specific settings is something that's probably very knowledge engineering intensive. And so we look forward to everybody's input and ideas about how one can come up with creative solutions to enable teachers and teaching assistants to create content that's compatible with automatic or supported grading, and how this can be done in a way that's practical. And with these notions, I'd like to hand it over to my co-panelists for further presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Matthias. Very well done. You mentioned also the problem, the challenge is, particularly for faculty in Vienna, we have different language styles. When we come to have students from Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Hungary, then the Austrians with migration background, we have to take that into account. The language is different. And also, we have to be aware of our knowledge engineering, what our expectations really are. At the moment, they're not that well expressed as some kind of a draft solution, but at the very end, it's but also some kind of a good feeling that this writing is good or bad. I guess you handle it very well. I say that's we have to see it differently, how we do exams and what the expectations are. Yes. Thank you very much. Now, Bernhard, Waltl, maybe hand over to you because you've also long experience more with legal texts in Germany. And last but not least, Florina, Piroi, that she will see what linguistics information people can offer. Fortunately, Professor Waibel is now not available. Sorry for that. And maybe then speak a bit about how we do exams at the law faculty, do his part, and then we move on to discussions, and we're waiting for questions. Please write your questions in the chat, and we try then to organize a nice discussion. It's also a question of, let's say, working places, because we employ quite many students, not students, it might be assistants, doing the work of exams, and the computer may then replace them. Bernhard, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Erich, and thank you, Matthias, for this great introduction, and also really sketching the full spectrum of possibilities and challenges. I just want to add to a couple of arguments or points that you already mentioned. I personally think it's very appealing to use technology, to use artificial intelligence, especially in the context of natural language processing, to support and not to automate the grading and the legal education. I think, especially when it comes up to handle a large number of submissions, homeworks, exercises, submissions, whatever, the innovation step that we have observed in natural language processing over the last years can really be a way forward, also to help you to scale more easily. Let's say I have to, review hundreds of homeworks, exercises within a short amount of time, objectively, on a neutral base. I think this is really something where technology could help. But the challenges, and Matthias pointed this out correctly, must not be neglected. What we see is you at least you shift the effort a little. Of course, you need someone that is implementing, that is building the system, that is training the models, for example. Those people have not been in the loop before. So I would not say that you decrease the effort of the teachers and educators to 100%, but you decrease it by, I don't know, a couple of percent. We need to discuss what can be automatized or supported. But on the other hand, the increased demand for knowledge engineers, data scientists, software engineers then increases. And we must not we must be warned that the system needs constant maintenance. This is not something that you build once and then you have it and you apply it again and again and again for the next couple of decades. And I know that a couple of law professors work with their students like that. They say, well, I did it once, I don't know, in international law or as a private law, and this is the case I am now doing for a couple of decades. This would not work with this kind of machine intelligence services. But nevertheless, speaking about the great opportunities that we have, I mean, we do see a lot of potential when it comes up to identify the writing style, find quality criteria, how well is a certain argument expressed, how well are certain concepts described in a legal document. Does this fit to what is stated in the supposed solution? I think here we do have a lot of challenge, a lot of potential that can be leveraged, can be easily leveraged. But I think step by step one can develop such a system, and this would be very attractive because, at least from my perspective, it's something that scales not only to the original starting point in national law, but also to other legal domains and other law faculties, maybe even outside of Vienna. So these are the main points that I wanted to add. But I guess, and I have seen Florina nodding and and smiling. I guess she has additional comments.
Yes, thank you very much. Very nice points and very important points. Actually, yes, we don't decrease the number of staff. Actually, so we move the support level. We increase the support level. So nowadays, students learning from each other more than we expect or what they should. So in the future, maybe we can say, yes, this is our expectation. So you have training possibilities. You can write this essay 10 times, 20 automated assessment. It's maybe not a real assessment, maybe differences, but it's quite close to the final result. And also, it's particularly from Vienna University, we are proud that we still do many oral exams. So examination is a dialogue between professors, docents, and students. And the same should then happen also for written exams. There should be then maybe more dialogue also. Why are you writing this and that? So the final assessment is then done by the professor, by his team, and also discussion with the students. So that let's say the final decision you pass, you may be a lawyer or not, is then a quite personal one from many professors, but a collective decision. And seeing the student as a human being and not so much as a number on a multiple choice sheet or a number in a long list of exams, oral exams, written exams. So that's, I see the huge potential. And also for Vienna University, we spent huge resources on grading, oral grading. We move in that direction, and also it's quite clear we haven't done any knowledge engineering about, let's say, the standards for a good paper. Yeah? So we have some, we can write it down, but what it is, it's not quite clear. And also the legal theorists like Grabmair always saying that methodology in law is something you learn. It's more practice. It's not theory yet. But with this methodology, we may develop in that direction. But anyhow, Florina, Piroi, you know what linguistics can do, how we write, how bad we write. And you may say a lot about this. And I may also mention a boss, Andreas Rauber, with him we have done research for a long time. And we've done Corona networks in the 1990s, actually assessing all this kind of stuff, seeing that has huge potential, but still has to be improved. But nowadays, Florina, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Really nice summarization of all the challenges we have in this project we are discussing here. So my background is definitely not law. Yeah, so I'm actually very mathematical oriented. I have a very strong mathematical background, and I moved to data science when I moved to Vienna about 18 years ago. So I have really lots of experience with data analysis. And now when I say data, don't think only of numbers. We did lots of numbers, but also lots of text. And in information retrieval, we also deal a lot with how to find the information. And grading, for example, can be also viewed retrieval problem. I have this question, how do I answer it? Or I have this answer. Is this reflected in the data in the law text? So this is one of the questions we are handling in information retrieval when we deal with text, like with patent data, for example, where we do a prior art search. But I'm not looking very much at these problems from the top level, which was very nicely described by Matthias. I'm looking at it more at implementation challenges. To get to that level, to be able to answer these questions, you really need to handle that data, to prepare that data in such a way that the machine will be able to display to you in the way you want it. And one of the main challenges I actually see with this automated grading is to adapt our thinking as graders, as people who grade students, to encode our process in grading into a way such that the computer understands that. Because we are often very subjective, and I've seen it also in my own grading of students, where they have, I put a general question and then they have 50 ways of answering, and then I have to balance it. Is this the right answer to my question, yes or no? So we have to talk to these people who do the grading, to think about how they grade, to think about how they assign the points, and then tell us, or try to tell it to a computer so that we can I would not say reproduce that process, but to assist them later on. I think this is like this. Is it correct? Yes or no? So I see a lot all these grading processes actually more like assistance to myself while grading students, not as a replacement. So that will not be possible definitely not in the near future, because this is a very difficult problem, natural language understanding, and the different ways of interpreting two words sitting to each other. It's really not always trivial, especially from a computer scientist point of view, from a computer point of view, from an algorithmic point of view. We as human, we will immediately see if it's a positive interpretation or a negative, but computers have a really difficult time deciding on that. And to get to that level that the algorithms will be able to assist with us, we really need to analyze all these linguistic corpora, be it text laws, be it questions, reference answers. We really need to analyze them from all these aspects so that we make it a little bit easier for the computers when they talk to us about a topic or that. So for me, as an information retrieval scientist and handling text data, really the most important part is what should I extract from that text and how should I encode that text so that I can really find it afterwards and also create an interpretation to the user so that the user can use it and build further on that answer. So yeah, this and I must say that at least for the German language, the amount of resources is not really let's say it's not there. Because all the research that's going on and all the positive experiences using the latest neural network algorithms and so on, they have a multitude of data they are trained on, but that data is almost all in English. And then if we move to a legal domain like in Austria, and where the examinations are all written in German language, and add to that dialects, then this adds another level of complexity on that, because dialect detection, even in English, is not a solved problem. So that's it's actually a very difficult task to detect sarcasm or dialects from East London expressing a legal text. So that would be my challenges from my point of view. How to encode the way we are grading. So to think about this process and data, available data for training and analyzing it, so that the algorithm then afterwards can build up on that.
Okay, thank you very much. I like your statement when it comes, how good we are. Can we replace the professors? His team seems to be still a way to go, because there are very difficult questions of understanding, text understanding, and that you can't do easily. I fully agree with that. From my side, maybe one additional question, because there was even a professor in Rotterdam, Richard de Multer, and he started with this in the 1990s already, and he was done only classification by, say, vector analysis, and said we have only to grade 5 clusters: good papers with getting a 1, very good, and other clusters up to the cast of negative, failure. And that was enough for him to, let's say, this kind of assessing papers, preliminary papers actually, not the final papers, but some training papers saying, yes, this is good for us to work on that. Do we really need this kind of, let's say, this full linguistic analysis? Because when you see the real exams in practice, very often you see, is the answer as it should be written there or not? If not, you don't get full points. There's not strong assessment why I've written this in that way. It's maybe there's no time available also. So maybe then seeing the right concepts, the right phrases, that's already a huge support for the professor doing the exam. Maybe just a comment on that question. Thank you.
I would like to start. I would like to start to raise one concern, but I seem to have troubles with networks. But we'll try. We have to be very careful. If we reduce this whole problem or this challenge to a classification problem, and we train, for example, a complex classifier, we may train a system that in the end, for example, discriminates due to the wrong reasons. Could be, for example, that the system finds out, I don't know, if a certain dialect is used or a certain wording is used or certain words are not used, that this is maybe a proxy, or this is something that is really indicating the grading. So if we do not understand really what the system does, and we could now speak about explainable AI, but we must not do so. We end up with a system that could potentially be really discriminating due to the wrong reasons. And then we would have a system that no one could really want, neither the students nor those who are then responsible for the grading. So I would be careful in saying, well, it's just a classification problem. I think, and I would still argue, it needs the interdisciplinary dialogue between us as the data scientists, you as the experts doing the grading now manually, maybe even representatives from the students that really say what are the different methods that are used and how can these methods be combined such that a comprehensive grading can be supported. Be rather careful by just reducing it to, so let's say, I use very complex word embedding model and then I do clustering, a little bit of classification, that's it. Although the numbers, let's say the evaluation in terms of accuracy may look high at the beginning.
Okay, thank you very much for this statement, Bernhard. You understand it quite well. I know you're living in Germany, but still there's an Austrian dialect and all this. It's not, it is different actually. And also for us as a law faculty, we know that, and for my oral exam, I know that there are students having as a mother tongue, Turkish, Serbian, Croatian, Hungarian or so. I have to assess differently. I know that their linguistic behavior is different. They make more errors. And if you just say, look to the strict requirement of having nice, good German, then the grading may be different, yes. But we have to be aware that nowadays, with our rules, if you have C2, you can study German, study with German level, you can study law, and in the very end, you may not have the level required in practice, but still you can do that because you may practice law also in other areas, let's other disciplines, other countries, in English or in Serbian, Croat, also an Austrian lawyer. That's also a possibility nowadays. So our linguistic level has a bit going down, actually. It's because we had a very high accreditation because only German. Nowadays we require also English and other languages. And we know there is a need for lawyers knowing at a very high level 2-3 languages. So that's also an aspect we have to do, and not to discriminate the students because the practice are looking for them. So we can't say yes, no way of getting a law degree because your German is not that perfect as we expect from an Austrian lawyer. That's true. And just to give a bit the numbers of our law faculty, we have about 10,000, more than 10,000 students. So we're the biggest law faculty in the German-speaking area, one of the biggest worldwide. We have 600 staff, altogether maybe about 80-90 professors and dozens doing the exam work. And there's a lot of support stuff. Mostly it's assistants, they're writing their PhD, their doctorate, and supporting the professor in, let's say, in teaching, but also mostly in exams. That's a huge burden. So having exams with numbers, more than 1,000 students is not, is quite common actually. And they still write in paper, handwritten text, not easy to read. And it's about up to 5 hours, meaning they can write 10, 15, 20 pages. So that's a real quantity. And therefore, you can imagine the professor and his team are sitting then in June or in January when they have exam time, reading all these papers and trying to get out the information required for doing assessments. So not so easy. We don't have the facilities for doing the exams online, so that we have now 1,000 computers available for exam work. The students have to bring their own computers. That creates other problems. So we have to use special software if you do that, but it's a possibility. So it's some investment required. That's not so expensive, but we'll see. I see we have lost Bernhard Waltl. Hopefully we'll come back.
I just turned off my video. It seems if there's this connection problem. I will produce it.
You know, yes, we appreciate it very much. So we have huge numbers. That's an advantage for doing online exams. But on the other hand, it's quite clear we have to be careful to be fair. Yes, but also know that.
And this is actually very much in line with what Bernhard noticed before. You cannot reduce this grading just to a simple classification. There are really several more aspects to grading a student or a work or whatever. And we had absolutely the same problem during our evaluation campaigns where we evaluate different information retrieval systems. There are systems which are very good at retrieving top documents or giving the perfect answer to one question. But when you are interested in having most of the answers, if not all of the answers, then that system, even if very good at processing one single question, is actually on the all not good. So then the solution we look at is always using different metrics, different grading system to get real an overview of that retrieval system, of that engine, of its quality, and what do we expect at the end if I decide to employ this engine in my company or that one. What are the expectations at the end? And all this system of metrics together, they should give a much better overview of the capabilities of that system than just a simple deciding on, okay, it's a grade 1 or a grade 2 or a grade 5 system. So this is too little usually. And this is actually one of the challenges with this essay grading and question answering systems, that you cannot use only one grade to decide on the quality of some answer or a question.
No, thanks. That's a very important point. I was imagining a situation where we give up our very rigid examination system to be able to have more looking to the personality of the student, saying, yes, can he be a good lawyer because he can write good text, he can articulate easily in oral form, he understands immediately what's happening in practice, the facts, and also then he draws the real conclusions when legal problems. I'm looking to that. So we really can tell students what they do, how we train them, and also say, yes, your style of writing is, let's say, maybe too influenced in German by Hungarian language, you should change that. Or let's say for some Austrians, yes, you write like a Styrian one. Actually, there's some, just to give an example, yes. And if you would be accepted by a Viennese law faculty, not by a law faculty or by a law firm, please use this style. Try to move on that. And I know from practice, particularly from administration, where I worked for a while, and also from Friedrich Lachmann was there working life. The using the right phrasing, the nice wording is so important in practice as a lawyer, because if you have the wording, you don't need the content that much, because you have always something to say. Yeah? And sometimes when you see some movies, first of all, you see the style, the wording, the practice of a lawyer, and then you see the content. And that's happening more often also. And if you don't have that, you cannot be too quick to immediately say that's the real problem. You have to be pretty procedural also.
Which brings everything brings a little bit of a paradox in this project, because all the computer algorithms dealing with text, they try to extract the essence of a sentence. Yeah, so they try to reduce the whole 20 words in the best case sentence to maybe 2, 3, let's say 5 most important words, and use only that for later analysis. And on the other side, we also want all these nice phrases to still be kept and being taken into the evaluation later on. So I see the need for 2 systems here, not only one.
Yeah, I agree. And also don't forget, when you're reading the papers, you see 20 pages, maybe have about 200. You can imagine how much you can read after 5 hours of reading, 10 hours of reading. You may overlook something easily. That's also a problem in practice. We do it as a team, but still it's not easy to handle. and also to be then willing to say, yes, he wrote in a different style, but that's acceptable, is not always easier, because the more you do exams, you have always to look at yourself in the mirror and say, yes, I'm still a human being doing exams, I'm not a god, and I can decide about everything, because in the very end you get a bit annoyed because there are same wrong answers, the same this and that. You're not sufficiently, you have to be careful not to be in a very rigid style and say, yes, error, and then do some different grading. I may move on to some topic in code standards. Matthias, you know that quite well. It's a bit because our people here would like to know what we do, really say what are standards, because in real exam you have let's say a draft, a solution, and then you compare your solution with the text written there, and you see you got the points or you didn't get the points because the answer was wrong or the problem was not really properly developed. But how you can encode that? So what are you doing then? You have a text. You have then a digital text, Matthias, and then you have maybe some kind of structuring of the text. But what's the next? What do you do then? See, because we ask as lawyers always, you have to find the right concepts, then the right line of argumentation, using the right phrases. I always do some joking about when you do legal writing, it's difficult to learn because half of it you have to take from others, and the other ones with the original, look everything, the whole thing a bit original. If you don't do it properly, then it looks like you have written everything from others. And if you don't use too much of your own style, it looks like that you don't know what others have done. So that's a bit and that's real actually, yeah, because when you do this kind of work for a long time, immediately everybody sees, oh, he doesn't know this and that. It looks a bit, it's a beginner's work. And also the moot course, we do quite many of them, have to overcome this phase and to be produce professional papers. But how do we do the encoding, the standards? So when you're a law professor saying, yes, I would like to use this, what do you ask then as information for him? What do you say, please deliver beyond text? Please, Matthias, and then maybe Bernhard, and then Florina, please.
The short answer, I think, is, as lawyers always say, it depends. And I think it's an open research question, in particular because when you look at learning sciences research, you see that even creating, so when you have to teach large groups of students, even without computers in the loop, people have turned towards peer review as a way of crowdsourcing grading of large amounts of papers or produced content, so to say. And it is not even easy to create a good grading rubric that humans can use to assess answers by other students, for example. So when I have a group of students and I want them to grade each other, I need to be very careful about how I design the metric that they use in order for them to do a good job at it, and for the eventual aggregated grade to approximate what the professor or the teacher would give. So I think making a computer do that is at least as complicated as that, and hence I think the task is the task would be one of approaching this as a research problem, starting with learning outcomes of this particular course, of a particular course, and trying to say, I'm teaching somebody public international law here, section 1, subjectivity in public international law, say, and then I have categorized text where I say, this is what I want the student to express with regard to international organizations, this is what I want the student to express with regard to states, and so on and so forth. And then, because the grade, and I couldn't agree more with what has been said earlier by Bernhard and Florina, the score is only, I know that for a machine learning person, we see this, oh, there's some data and a score attached to it. Let's train a classifier because I have a hammer here and I see nails. I know it's very tempting, but I completely agree with what's been said, that just as we have an encoding of the text on the one hand, we need to ideally decompose the grade into its components that are defined in terms of the learning outcomes of what the student should take away from the course in order to make this matching easier. So I do think, so those are this is the grid among which I would characterize this problem, which I think is a research problem. It's not solved in any way.
Okay, Bernhard.
To add to Matthias and to give at least kind of an answer attempt, I think it is important that once such a project is started and kicked off, that you need let's say a comprehensive or at least a representative group in the project team. So it's not just sufficient to have like a couple of professors that are experts in grading and then a couple of data scientists, and you will find this the great solution. You would also need to take into account other parties, such as prior student representatives, to really have like this 360-degree perspective on the problem. Because otherwise, as Matthias had this nice picture of the hammer and the nail, you say, well, here I have a couple of nails and I do have the biggest hammer, namely NLP methods. There's a lot of things are also publicly available. And so now I'm going to build something, but then you get maybe the problems or lack of adaptation afterwards, or maybe even some things you did not even think about beforehand. We have not touched upon the issue of data privacy and data protection, which is definitely something that need to be sorted out. But yeah, this is the point that I want to make. It's really an interdisciplinary problem. Of course, main parts are NLP, but there are so much more things that need to be considered and that should be considered. But because I think that there is a huge potential, and I would be happy if we together could make a step forward. Not only for the University of Vienna, but maybe also for the whole education domain. And I think the question needs to be addressed: how to teach students in the 21st century in legal domain. And this is something that definitely contributes to that. But as said, it really requires interdisciplinary exchange and look at the problem from a holistic point of view, and not only here is NLP. Let's make it a classification problem, and happy. And by everyone, we mean the law professors, because they can reduce the time for correction to, I don't know, 20%, 50%, maybe less.
Okay. Florina, please, your comments.
So we should not forget that the law domain is really a very specific one. So there are lots of NLP tools there, and when we try to encode this knowledge, these texts or it's very important to understand how those tools act upon handling that data. So I really need to select to make a really good selection of those tools, and not only that, but also employ the help of the experts. Ideally, ask them to explain me why this sentence is much more, it's better this way, written in this way than in the other one. Why is this text so much different, which is so much different than a newspaper article or something? Why should I handle this in a different way than a Wikipedia article? So I'm simplifying the things a little bit, but as we heard before, the legal texts are very particular from the NLP point of view. They are different genre. They are really linguistically a different genre, and we cannot use the tools which are right now everywhere around to and apply them just to a different piece of text. We really need to adapt them, and this adaptation, this involves a different type of encoding. We have to move at the procedural level of the domain knowledge to understand what's happening, and then update these tools to this specific domain. So that if I'm using a Stanford parser, for example, it will give me some results, of course, but they might not be very useful for the data at hand. So I need to adapt them, and I need to use a completely different list of stop words, for example, or I need to understand that sentences are on average not only 15 words long, but maybe 25 to 30 sentences long. And then the whole process, it's much more time consuming, because these tools are not trained on long sentences, are only trained on short ones. And also paraphrasing is an extremely important problem in the legal domain, from what I understood. I mean, I have a lot of experience with patent documents where they use all kind of inventive forms to just say toothbrush, and you need to recognize that. And I'm pretty sure that in the law domain, so in the legal documents, it's probably similar to this.
Thank you very much. Just to add, I refer to my work in the 1990s, long time ago. I had also this kind of encode standards, and at that time we looked at the Sauri ontologies, we would say nowadays. So finding using the right terminology in the right context, then also using some kind of logical structures, then also quite clear particular phrases, formulations, particularly when it comes to the Keck judgments of the ICJ or a Cassis de Dijon. There's one phrase you should always use when you solve a legal case. And in practice, you always, as an examiner, and I'm one in international law, you're quite happy when they come up with the right concepts. That's that where you say yes, start smiling. If they don't come up with the right concepts, then you very often say, that's easy. For instance, we're doing now quite many with the corona cases, developing cases, and one is in particular, an old ambassador gets ill with corona, and like the hospital, they are, let's say, too full, and so someone has to go out to make space for the ambassador, and does he have the right to do that or not? So they have to go to the international law. There's some kind of a particular treatment for an ambassador, and you may argue in international law that an international law state is obliged to kick out a younger person with more chances of survival to make space for the ambassador because he has right to special treatment. Chat, and that's also very good, particularly from Stefan Kirnbauer. Thank you very much. As we mentioned, this kind of program would be then some kind of a standard for what you should achieve in a discipline. Yes, what kind of concepts you should know, and what phrases, what kind of language should be used. And the question is then, should this be open source and transparent? I think yes, should be. That's the question. Then also it would lead the students training to just match the program algorithm. I would also say quite right. Very good question. Maybe who would like to start with that? Matthias, look that you have something to say. Yes, as always. Please.
Briefly raise the points which I think are very good. So with regard to open sourcing, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, we have the same, it's sort of the flip side problem of the demand for algorithmic transparency, in the sense that we want things to be transparent in order to create the safety of the law, or Rechtssicherheit as we Germans would call it, or rule of law as the Americans would call it. So there needs to be enough transparency in there for the main trust in the legal system that underlies everything legal to not be eroded more than necessary. With regard to gaming the system, so to say, that would presume, I think, so the systems, for example, with regard to checking source code submissions in technological courses is very advanced. I think it's an empirical question what the right trade-off is between automating the system far enough so that it leads to gains in efficiency and quality, while at the same time making sure that somebody looks onto it, looks at the submission in order for it to not be just a game, list of keywords. On the other hand, the objective, if the person has memorized all the correct keywords to game the system, he or she must have learned something. So in other words, you want to get to the point where cheating the system is just at least as educational as actually learning the material in the sense. So this, I think, should be the maxim here. I would have something to say with regard to the operationalization of legal assessments in the second question, but I would like to give the other panelists the opportunity to react to that as well.
Yeah, maybe that's this from Friederike Zufall may just add to that, because that's maybe good in also to save a bit time for other questions, because it really leads, if we train students to write like that and we are successful, then also the judges write like that, and kind of the judges will have to use this style, and we have to see what is it a bit some kind of a self-fulfilling system now at the very end, and we have to be evaluation would have to be much more careful than expected. So the impact would be quite huge, because nowadays everybody writes as he likes, and maybe good or bad. But then would be then quite strong standards that will predominate, be used predominantly. And also in Germany, you write judgments, and then actually will then train students to write judgments as the way they should be. And also judgment writing and also legal predictions that exist. So you prepare, the computer can quite easily look at facts and figures and judgments so far and say, yes, this would be the right solution, giving the previous case law. So how to keep this kind of subjectivity, self-assessment, the lawyer, the judge as being the real decision-making person, to say, yes, nice, what's support here, but in the very end, I decide. So this element should be maybe also then but developed in a particular way. So Matthias, just to add to that, and I guess then we'll move on to Bernhard Waltl. It's mostly on the judgment level, yes. We can't hear, sorry.
Sure, I understand the prompt for me. So, Bernhard, you could.
Friederike Zufall said, yes, then in Germany they are training to write judgments like the judges are doing. So that's the main training and the main goal to achieve, to write a judgment like a judge. They have a standard at law faculty, then you may also have a standard at, particularly in the justice. If justice say, yes, please write that this according to this standard, and there's additional concerns like particular privacy, data protection issues. So please write privacy friendly. So don't include any private facts, figures, personal things. Avoid as much as possible. So anonymization is not easy to do all this. Then maybe we have used this style, no other style. So also the independence of the judge may be a bit in challenge because he's using a different style. It's a bit standardization, how far I can go, yeah.
So if I may just say one thing with in response to the question of operationalization, I think I have always understood the task. So in German legal education, you write judgments, and it has been my experience that those are graded with regard to the degree to which they match the pattern, the correct judgment as it's handed to the graders. So you have this cascading structures of requirements and legal consequences that compose a large graph, so to say, and then you have a correct graph and you have the graph that the student hands you. And I've been under the assumption that grading, automated or supported grading, would be supporting this matching process, not creating this graph automatically via some AI judge to begin with. So I think those are two different things, and I was under the impression that it's the former and not the latter in this particular context. But Bernhard, I would like to hand it over to you here.
Yeah, just to briefly pick up the question by Mr. Kinbauer. I would totally argue that the system should be open source, definitely. And I also see the point that this might lead to a state where students would optimize the program rather than something else, of course. This is why we originally proposed that this should not be used, at least not at the beginning, to fully automatize the grading process, rather really to give something that gives you feedback, that improves your style of writing, that really helps you to get educated, to get used to what the legal experts expect from you to deliver finally. Definitely. I mean, I am a software engineer. I constantly get feedback by my IDE. I write something, the system tells me, well, you are not allowed to write this and that in the Java language. You're not allowed to write this and that in Python. And this is why I can write code much better, much more effectively. Of course, I'm constrained always by what the system gives me as a feedback. So I don't actually see this as a problem. I rather see it as a feature if used in the right context. And the point that Federica is touching upon, this is super fascinating. And this is a very complex matter, actually. We would like to discuss now with third person, because yeah. So the state exam or the bar exam here in Germany, I think it could consider some extensive rework, at least from my opinion. Maybe this would be something one could discuss here. Yeah, this is. I'm not sure whether I have now an opinion that I want to share here publicly. But yeah.
I guess we quite agree that exam work is very rigid in many cases, depending a bit on the German Bundesland, the Free States, and Bundesländer, also in Austria, a bit on faculties. Vienna University is proud, the faculty is proud to be very rigid in its exams, not like lazy in Salzburg or other countryside universities. That's a bit some kind of not saying, but still that exists. Therefore, there's standards that's happening, that's going on, and it may be increased. And also, that question is, when someone is writing without using a standard, it should be also acceptable. That's, I guess, important. That if the system says yes, it seems to be okay, but the standards are not fulfilled at all, then you write, then one should say yes, fine. Excellent, excellent. Better than everything else. Please, Bernhard.
Maybe one comment, because I don't want now everyone else gets the impression that I hide away from answering the question. I would try to think in a direction. There are so many domains in which judges write the legal assessments. Maybe there are some restricted domains in which they say, well, here a computer system could really be supportive. Let's say maybe there's a very restricted tax domain or a public law domain. Maybe not a penalty law or some civil code domains. Maybe that we find something very restricted, or say we could try out whether a system could prepare an assessment on a neutral base, on an objective base, and then move forward together with the judge and see how far can we go with systems that prepare these answers, that assess these reports and court decisions and so forth. Maybe this would be a way forward here.
To give an example, what we consider is very useful, that you have the text written by the student and you get the assessment saying how it complies with the, let's say, the master solution, the draft solution by the professor, and then you see it's good, it's all green or it's all red, it could be yellow. It's a huge support, actually. So if you do that, you may reduce the examination time to maybe about 50-70%, and also the increased quality. So that's the first step, actually. And also maybe that's also a question about explanation. Quite clear that there should be more review as saying this is the right answer and why, and your writing style is so good or bad, and also giving explanations, or it's maybe dominated by your mother tongue. Then concerning data protection, is quite clear for us that we ask for written text, sure, but only the text itself, not how long it took to write it, how he has done it. Was about typing problems, correction work, and all this. But you could do much more. It's saying how he has produced the text. We don't ask for that. So it's only delivery of the text as such that's important. And also it's quite clear you have to be, we collect more data about the student, but we have to be saying, yes, we have to be quite aware this kind of text we do it, and the rest we forget. Anyhow, really have something to say, yes, with the lawyers.
Yes, I definitely will probably bring a completely different point of view to this training of judgments, which I have to confess I was not really aware of. But legal, these kind of judgments, in my understanding of logic text, you have to argue for something, and you have to follow a sequence of inferences so that you arrive to a conclusion. So for me, in my mathematical training, this is clearly a proof. So you are starting from a set of axioms, a set of theorems, and you're using some rules, and you are generating a proof. And I did during my PhD, I actually did exactly this. You start from a set of axioms, and then you generate the text to explain your mathematical proof. And these kind of these proofs, some of them are really difficult to obtain, and then research went into the other direction. Okay, I have this proof, just check it, is it okay or not? So and there are other very simple proofs which are actually very boring, and then you are happy that the computer system would just write it for you. I just want to see it at the end that it's written there. So in this respect, I would probably be quite happy if such a system would write a judgment for me, and I just check it at the end. Yes, it's correct. There is nothing wrong with it. And then there is another one which would check that my judgment is correct. And this involves probably some kind of extra work to translate all these legal concepts into logics, into first order logics, and I know that there is work into this direction to translate legal text and law text into some kind of logical form to be able to reason on them, to see if there are loopholes in it or something like that. So I would say, why not train? I know from experience that starting from a set of facts, you can generate different proofs to arrive to the same conclusion. There are different paths in the graph of a proof. So I would say that one could generate different type of judgments depending on the style you are wishing for. It's just a different set of conditions you are starting from, or you are adding different constraints to your proof generator,
Thank
to
you.
your judgment generator.
Very helpful. We have come to the end. I have to be strict because we have only 15 minutes break, and then we have the fireside chat with the president, the incoming president of the Association of Computing Machinery. I'm a member of it, the ACM, the biggest organization of computer professionals. And it's an Austrian lady. It's professor at the University of Linz. He was also in Vienna. And I will look forward. It will be very interesting for our project, just to say, yes, we are now trying to collect some money, then doing real research. That's very time consuming. And we try to follow the highest standards and give feedback, also go into discussion with the law faculty, saying why do this, why do this. It's maybe quite a tough assessment on one side for the computer work, but also for the human work. There may be some errors that shouldn't be. There may be other errors that have been solved easily by the examiners. But in general, it's, as Bernhard, Matthias mentioned, they are a bit, one is lawyer, the other one is not yet a lawyer, will never be a lawyer, but still quite interesting law. There's something happening that shouldn't be, and we have to change that. We have to improve the legal science, we have to improve the legal profession, and this kind of standard settings may help, because we look how good you should write, how good you should be oral, how you should assess legal problems, how good you should read, analyze the legal text. All this kind of is our question of legal informatics now, and we're quite happy that we're a bit in the center of the discussion. And we have now some data and some tools to move on, and I guess next year we'll have more to come. Also one concerning privacy, it's quite clear that we don't keep a strong record of all the written exams. Here's the limit. There may be a standard what we keep and what we forget, actually. And at the moment, I don't know anything about student when he's coming, not his previous exams, nothing at all. And maybe we do it a bit differently, but still in the very end, every exam is a new start. That's our principle. So in that way, thank you so much, Matthias, Bernhard, Florina. It's always nice to talk to young people with some bright minds and good ideas. And hopefully in the very end, we will succeed. So thanks also to the audience. Thanks for the questions, particularly also for Erich. Very nice questions. And sorry for this kind of technical problem at the beginning. There's some other things going on besides my work at ReMeP and the university at some medical treatments. So sorry for that. And we have now a break for 15 minutes. And then we start the fireside chat at 45 minutes. So in about 50 minutes in the plenary. That's the Bühne. In main stage, that's it. Thank you, Stefan. So it's a bit to have to be careful to be in the right side and to get used to it. In the real world, you know where the right room is. In the artificial places, you have to be careful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erich. Thanks everyone else.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you
Bye
for
bye.
the opportunity.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.